You might have learned about some of these guys in history class, but reimagine your teacher didn't tell you the whole story. From some of the most infamous criminals throughout time to the first heavyweight bare-knuckle boxer, here are the 10 biggest badasses in American history. Hey guys, this is your host, American Eye. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy that video. Number 10. Benjamin Franklin. You better believe this badass guy shows up on our currency. It's well documented that Ben Franklin was a complete savage, and not everyone realizes. You might just think of him as being that old guy who flew a kite around with a key, but there's a whole nother side of him you're probably not familiar with. Benjamin Franklin was certainly one of the brightest minds of all time and helped shape our revolution. But it's also fairly well documented that Franklin was a Freemason and a part of a secret society known as the Hellfire Club. There's been much debate about what this club was actually about, but many accounts tell tales of committing unspeakable sins, orgies, violence, etc. at this secret clubhouse in Ireland. When he lived in London, it's also believed he would conduct body-snatching raids with his roommate William Hewson, who studied anatomy. The basement of his apartment was found with over a dozen bodies, according to the Smithsonian. Ben Franklin also had a reputation of being a womanizer, especially as an ambassador to France. He confessed in his diary to have an overwhelming libido. He discussed to younger comrades to stick to older women because they don't get pregnant and can't tell the difference in the dark. Total savage. Number 9. Andrew Jackson. You might see this guy on the $20 bill or on a statue in Washington, D.C. and not realize how badass he was. At a young age during the Revolutionary War, he was struck by a British person after refusing to clean his shoes. He's been opposed to the federal banking system, which is also a good thing, and was an avid participant in duels. He also seemed to be invincible at times during strange incidents and was also a major general in the War of 1812. In case you didn't know, at least 16 of our 45 presidents have had assassination plots or attempts on their lives. That's over 33%. Andrew Jackson avoided getting assassinated from Richard Lawrence, who was unlucky enough to have both his pistols miss fire at point-blank range. Jackson then proceeded to beat the man with his cane afterwards. Some even claim he had the wildest party at the White House during his inauguration, where heavy drinking took place and an approximate crowd of 15,000 people were all there. Talk about throwing an all-out rager. Number 8. Davy Crockett. Texas declared independence from Mexico on March 2, 1836, and for a point in time, they were actually their own country. Although some of his most memorable moments come from during the time of the Texas Revolution, the saga of Davy Crockett is like no other in history. Originally a colonel for the militia in Tennessee, he served some roles in politics. Born in 1786, he was born during a time when the U.S. was trying to spread west and nothing would stand in our way. His skills as a soldier and explorer were evident in the Creek War, but was also a skilled hunter. He claimed to shoot down 105 bears in 1 year. He became a celebrity, and during his role as a congressman, he was sketched doing some outlandish things like riding a crocodile, for example. During the Battle of the Alamo, he gained his most fame for taking the courageous stand against the Mexican army, but his attempts proved unsuccessful. It's still unclear whether or not he was captured or fought till the very end at the Alamo. Number 7. Jesse James. When you think of the Wild Wild West, a few names pop into mind. One of them is definitely Jesse James, who's part man, part legend. Another American known for roaming the frontier, this outlaw might have got his violent tendencies during the Civil War, but head out west for riches and fame. This man had one wild adventure of a life that will live on in history and make him pretty badass. Born in 1847 in Missouri, he was known for bank robberies, train robberies, and being the leader of a criminal enterprise. The people of the South kind of saw him as a Robin Hood type criminal that stole from the rich and helped out the people of the community. Some are skeptical about his generosity and think he was a no-good dirty criminal. Probably what martyrized him was when he was shot in the back of the head by a bounty hunter named Robert Ford while fixing a painting that was crooked. Those involved of the shooting of Jesse James seemed to be cursed later on in life. Today, his house serves as a museum despite his criminal life. Number 6. Wild Bill Hickok. Born in 1837 as James Butler Hickok, he's an American folk hero who's often portrayed in various Western films, and his reputation is slightly boosted by outlandish legends. Raised during a time of complete anarchy on a farm, he fought for the Union and worked as a spy. Once his service was over, he headed west and explored the frontier, becoming famous in the process. With the skills he picked up in the Army, he was notable for his marksmanship and got involved in numerous shootouts and even wildlife encounters. He was mauled and pinned down by a bear before he took it out with a knife. One of his shootouts sounded pretty crazy in Nebraska, where he challenged 4 men at once to a duel and shot 3 men in the head and 1 in the cheek. Another somewhat cowardly assassination took place when he was playing cards in Deadwood, South Dakota. He was holding on to the now legendary Dead Man's Hand, or 2 pair with aces and eights. Number 5. Al Capone. Born in New York City, this Italian-American was the boss of a crime organization during the Prohibition era for 7 years. Al Capone received the nickname of Scarface after his face was slashed with a pocket knife when he was a younger teenager. This left him with a scar that was pretty noticeable. During a time of the Great Depression, Al Capone still showed compassion, opening soup kitchens to feed the poor. This legendary gangster ran an unbelievable empire of illegal booze, gambling, and prostitution in the Chicago area during the 1920s. He was also responsible for the legendary Valentine's Day Massacre that left several of his enemies in a bloody mess in an alleyway. Al Capone could only be charged with tax evasion because all of his witnesses were too scared to come forward and testify against him. He stayed 7 years at a federal prison, including the notorious Alcatraz, which made him even more badass. Capone was eventually released and spent his final days at an estate in Miami, Florida. His house has now been refurnished and is on sale for $14.9 million. Number 4. John L Sullivan. We might see UFC fighting today and think they're all pretty badass, but back in the days, when boxing was bare-knuckled, things got a little bit out of control. John Sullivan is recognized as the first heavyweight boxing champion in the world, and he got that title by kicking a lot of butt. Also known as the Boston Strongboy, he boasts a record of 40 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws, and 1 no decision. We should also add that 34 of those decisions came by knockout. To say exactly how well he'd do in modern times, but we bet most guys nowadays won't even go in the ring without wearing gloves. He claimed he could lick any man on earth, and not in the way you might be thinking. In any case though, he started off his career with 34 wins in a row. The only match he lost was by James J. Corbett in 1892. Some feel as though James wasn't truly boxing that match and decided to use John's weight problems against him by running around the ring until he got tired. He died a rich man in New England after years of neglecting his weight problem and overall health. If you look back and read some of his fight details, you'll realize how dominant he was in the ring. Number 3. Alvin York. This American sergeant is considered to be the most decorated of all U.S. soldiers during the First World War, and he received the Medal of Honor for his selfless courage in France. Despite his platoon receiving heavy casualties, he led a crazy attack on a German machine gun nest where he took out 25 men and captured 132 during the mission as well. He was originally against the violence of the war, but accepted his duties after being drafted. It was also stated that he took out a huge line of charging German soldiers with only a pistol. Being singled out as the best American soldier during the conflict, he became an international hero in France as well and gained celebrity status after his time in the military. Number 2. George S. Patton. We all know it took guts, courage, and strength to win the Second World War. Luckily for us Americans, our top general had all those qualities. Arlington Cemetery contains approximately 400,000 soldiers, and they make up one of the biggest cemeteries in the country. Of course, only the most badass Americans are able to be buried here. This is where you'll also find the graves of American historical figures, such as the tomb of John F. Kennedy and one of our most famous generals, George S. Patton. In his earlier years, Patton competed in marksman competitions, attended West Point University, chased after the notorious Pancho Villa, got a Purple Heart in World War I, and was an Olympic athlete. He helped liberate France from occupation and defeated the massive German offensive in the Battle of the Bulge in eastern France. His role in taking down the fascists in Italy was also quite noticeable. Patton and Winston Churchill were also rightfully suspicious of the Soviets and wanted to go to war with them immediately afterwards. This was known as Operation Unthinkable, and it was a full-blown plan to invade East Europe. If you think about it, Americans could have had the upper hand with a nuclear bomb. Some believe the Russians knew about this plan and it led to Patton's assassination, but that's just a conspiracy theory, right? And number 1, Chris Kyle. It's never easy to choose the most badass person in the US, but we might as well choose the most prolific sniper in US history. Chris Kyle was a US Navy SEAL during the Iraq War, and although it wasn't the most justified war in US history, Chris Kyle and our veterans displayed a great amount of courage and efficiency. In order for a sniper to be credited, they needed confirmation that someone had witnessed it take place. Chris had 150 confirmed kills according to the Pentagon, and who knows how many unconfirmed kills took place. The previous American to hold the record only had 109, putting him at number 1. As other badasses on this list, Kyle met his end from a cowardly act by a bullet to the back during a meeting at a firing range with a mentally ill former soldier. As they say, those who live by the gun, die by the gun.